I am so happy to present to you tonight, Kristin Nelson.
Last summer, I was lying in bed with my cat Tigre. He's an orange cat that we adopted from the Humane Society. Someone had tried to kill him by stabbing him. Poor kid. Well, anyway, we went to the Humane Society, and he put on a performance like no other. He picked us, and that was it, and he came home with us. So I was laying in bed with Tiggs, as I like to call him, and he suddenly started to sniff my body. He started at my arm, worked down to my abdomen, and we got to this spot right here. He let out a loud Then he spent a good deal of time trying to cover it with a sheet. Well, 3 weeks later, I was diagnosed with cancer, and it was right there. I unfortunately had double-hit lymphoma, a very aggressive cancer that required immediate treatment. And the interesting thing was, I was one of the few patients who had my first CAT scan before I got to the hospital. So the term cancer hadn't even settled in. I didn't really, there's so much to grapple with. Yet 2 days later, I was in the hospital starting chemotherapy. I was painful, scared, and extremely nauseated. Because this cancer was so aggressive, besides the IV chemo, they actually would several times a week take me down and put it right into my spinal column. And that is something I hope none of you ever experience. Not a lot of fun. And during the first day, I really wasn't sure that I could go through with it. I had my doubts. And that's when my nurse Alyssa had a wonderful idea. She asked Lance to bring Chaos up for a visit. And 3 hours later, a large police dog walked into my room. Chaos lifted my spirit with each wag of his tail. It was amazing. He just brought bright and light and unconditional love to a really bad situation. Dr. Judith Siegel found that people who live with pets visit their physicians less frequently each year than those who live without pets. Another study by James Serpel found that people with pets get more exercise because, it's hard to say no to those brown eyes. They want to go for a walk, and no matter what the weather is, you're out there walking. People who live with pets also enjoy lower levels of cholesterol and triglycerides, and they even have lower blood pressure. And that came out of a very famous stockbroker study by Dr. Karen Allen. She took 48 brokers who were all on the drug lisinopril to lower their blood pressure, divided them in half, and had one half adopt pets while the other remained petless. Then she measured heart rate and blood pressure before, during, and after a stressful event. And, as we would all guess, when the people with the pets had the lowest blood pressure, they had the smallest increases in blood pressure, and their blood pressures returned to normal more quickly than those without pets. Okay, so now she decided, I want to take my research to the next level. I'm going to study an even more stressed out group of people than the stockbrokers, which in light of our markets might be hard to find. So she studied married couples. She took 120 married couples with pets and 120 couples without, and then she put each one of the spouses through a little test. She measured their heart rate before and blood pressure before, during, and after a stress, and then she'd do it with the presence of a pet, a friend, and their spouse. And of course, we all know those that had the pets had the best responses. But what was really interesting is that, and it amazed me, a veterinarian, is that the pets had more of an effect than the spouse or the friend. So the next time you're facing a stressful situation, I would highly recommend that you send your friend and your spouse to the movies, but keep your pet close by. In addition to those physical benefits of pet ownership, pets also decrease our feelings of loneliness and isolation, because pets are a great a great catalyst for social interaction. Many men, when they come into the clinic with their pets, will tell me how easy it is to meet ladies when they're walking their dog. And they'll often refer to their pets as chick magnets. And so why are we all so drawn to animals? I mean, what is it that you just can't walk by an animal without stopping to say hello? Well, that's the human-animal bond, an innate connection that exists between us and animals of all varieties. And the simple act of petting an animal actually decreases the stress hormone cortisol in our bloodstream as well as that of the animal. So that's why Chaos was so helpful for me, because he came in, I looked at him, I petted him, and he decreased my blood pressure by decreasing my cholesterol level. He helped me relax. But there's even more. When you pet an animal, it also increases levels of serotonin and dopamine, the feel-good hormones. So that's why pets are such a great therapy, and they're being used in hospitals and nursing homes. They're on the front line with our troops, and they're great at home when you come home from a stressful day. I mean, let's face it. When you get home, it doesn't matter what your day has been like. Your dog is happy to see you. And the later you are, the happier they are. For the next 4 months, once I was hospitalized, I was in and out of the hospital, and that's when I was supposed to come and do the book signing here at Changing Hands. And it was kind of cute, because when I was first diagnosed, I asked my oncologist, Dr. Kukanor, if I could still make it to the book signing in 3 weeks. He laughed hysterically, because he knew what was coming for me, and thank goodness I didn't. So unfortunately, we had to cancel that and reschedule for now. And when I was home from the hospital, my cat Tigre was my constant companion. He never left my side. Now normally, Tigre is a typical cat. You know, as the saying goes, dogs have owners, cats have staff. Well, that's Tig's. But he never left my side. And when things got really bad, he would put his paw on my face and purr. Now, cats purr when they're happy, but they also purr when they're ill and when they're painful, because purring releases endorphins that improves their mood. I like to think of it as kitty meditation, because I've seen cats purr in the most unusual situations. So when Tiggs was purring, he was actually helping me feel better, because we've already talked about the serotonin and dopamine. On top of that, it also increases prolactin and oxytocin, which make us feel more nurtured and secure. So who knew, but this shelter cat was so smart. He knew exactly what to do when I was ill. So before I continue with more stories about animals, I just wanted to take a minute to express my gratitude. A year ago we were supposed to be here, and there were many days in the hospital where I just thought tonight would never happen. I used to say, it's great to be vertical, because there were so many times where I just couldn't even roll out of bed. And so I just want to express how much joy it is to be here finally and talking about animals with people who love animals. I want to thank Pina, who was just a delight, and her staff, who through the chemotherapy, they were so understanding and allowing me to reschedule. I would also like to thank Mabry. I'm hoping she's here. I'm sorry, Mabry. She actually chose my book as a staff pick here, and the kind words she wrote about it was definitely the highlight of my last year, which was pretty tough. And lastly, I want to thank all my friends who came out tonight. I always knew I had wonderful friends, but when you go through something like this, that's when you realize how really wonderful your friends are. So I am truly blessed, and I just want to thank all of you. So now, we're going to move into the book, which is why we're all here. I just wanted to give you a little background.
How are you doing now? Are you doing good?
Oh, I'm cancer-free.
Wonderful.
Oh, sorry. I guess I left that out, huh?
Yes.
Yeah. My 2 PET scans have been clean,
Okay.
and I'm off all medications. I'm just on vitamins now, and I'm back to work a day and a half a week.
Good.
So.
Good.
And in fact, a lot of my colleagues from work are here. We have, let's see, it's chemo brain, you get a little nervous. Jill and Abby and Michelle and Amber and Dr. Anger. And it looks like we brought some furry pets too, so that's great. Anyway, so the book. How did the book come about? It's really interesting that I wrote a book because I have to tell you, I don't like to write. In high school, hated writing. I remember my English teacher took me aside one day and said, you know, I really like what you wrote. You should be a children's author. I thought she was cuckoo. Hated it. And what I realized is that I wasn't writing. Back then, I would get an idea, I would jot down a few sentences, and then I'd automatically switch into editing mode. Has anyone ever done that? You start rereading it because it's not perfect and you want to make it perfect. It totally kills your creativity. And when you do that, it becomes frustrating, and an hour later, you only have one sentence to show for it. Hard to write a book that way. So I wish I had known back then what I know now, that when you write, just write. Don't worry about if it's perfect. You will edit later, and edit, and edit, and edit. This book took me 4 months to write, and it had about 5 months of editing. And I hired 2 professional editors to go through it, and so far there's only been 1 mistake that's been found. So, you know, you don't have to make it perfect. I guess that's my take home, is when you're writing, just try and get it down. So when the teacher told me to be a children's author, I thought, you're crazy. I'm going to be a veterinarian. Because ever since I was little, I grew up with pets. I had a pony named Peanuts. He could sit, shake, and roll over. I didn't know that I shouldn't teach him dog tricks. And I had a little French poodle named Babette. And poor Babette, she should probably be sainted in the dog world with what she put up with. I used to dress her up like she was a doll. When we played cowboys, she wore a red bandana. And when we had tea parties, she wore a pink hat. And sometimes I used to wrap a bandage on, or put a bandage on her leg just to watch her hop around. Yeah. And when Babette got sick of me, she would go behind the sofa, and that was the signal that I was supposed to leave her alone. Well, sometimes I didn't, and then my mom would tell me, well, if you go bother her, she's going to bite you, and then I'm going to send you to your room. Which I thought, oh, that's ridiculous. Babette was bad, not me. So I did it, and sure enough, she nipped me, and I got sent to my room. So I learned to respect animals at an early age. When I was 4, I went with Babette to Dr. Anderson's for her annual exam and vaccinations. I was fascinated. I saw all the brochures in the lobby. I saw the dog poster. I was in all my glory. And then when we got in the exam room, Dr. Anderson let me help. I thought I had died and gone to heaven. Then after we were done with Babby, who wasn't thrilled with Dr. Anderson, she actually did try to bite him, he let me go back and see all the animals. And that day when I left the clinic, I told my mom, I'm going to be a veterinarian like Dr. Anderson. And I never wavered. I added other things to it, but I never wavered. That was just what I was going to do. And I have to tell you, it's been wonderful. The more I learn about animals, the more excited I get, and the more they amaze and delight me. There's so many different stories to choose from, but it's always something that happens. I had one little parakeet that I took care of named Pete, and he was quite the talker. He came into me because his beak would overgrow and he'd have to have it trimmed up. And the first time I met him, they opened the cage door, he jumped onto my finger, and he looked at me and he said, I'm Pete. You know, I mean, for parakeets to talk, they can talk, but usually not so much. Usually African greys and devil yellowhead Amazons are the big talkers. So he said that, and then he looked at me and said, my address is, and he said his address, which amazed me, and then he gave me his phone number. And his owners were really smart. They taught him his address and phone number, so in case he ever got lost, he could tell the person what his address and phone number were. It was brilliant. So anyway, so Pete used to be allowed to run around or fly around the house, which I don't recommend because they can get in so much trouble. I've seen electrocutions, poisoning, all kinds of stuff. So I don't recommend this, but this is what they did. So when they would get home from work, Pete would fly to greet them at the door, and he'd perch on their shoulder and accompany them into the kitchen for his favorite time of the day, a beer. They'd sit at the table, and Pete would sit on the lip of the glass and snap the foam off the beer. I also don't recommend beer for animals. I'll just be clear. So one day, Pete got too much beer and head first into the glass. So they pulled him out, brought him into the clinic. I detoxed him for 24 hours, and he was fine. And as he went out the door, he looked at me and said, "Happy New Year!" Such a character. And that's what's been amazing. You just never know what these little ones are going to do. So there's another iguana that I used to take care of called Connie. And Connie was a very smart iguana. She loved everyone except me because I gave her the shots. And she was probably about 4.5, 5 feet long. And so I used to get a little anxious when I saw her name on the schedule because I knew I had one chance to grab her or she was going to grab me. So I'd go in there and sometimes I tried not talking, I tried perfuming, I tried taking off the coat, I tried turning off the lights. Didn't matter. She always knew exactly where I was. The minute they lifted the top off her carrier, boom, right at me. So I was really glad when we finished her treatments. She really, I think she gave me a few gray hair there. But I just tell this story because all the little critters have personalities, even ones you don't really think of. You know, like iguanas love the color purple. Just love it. And quite often they'll come in with a purple blanket or a purple towel or whatever. So I'm always careful never to wear purple nail polish because, I don't want to have a problem. And just a word of advice here in Arizona. Ladies, if you paint your toenails, be very careful around tortoises because they have great color vision. They even see ultraviolet. But anyway, be careful because there's been many incidences of tortoises biting toes because they think it's food. So, and you're wearing your flip-flops and sandals, so just be careful around tortoises. And fingers, yes. As long as we're talking about reptiles, I'll just tell you one more reptile story, then we'll switch to something furry. But one day I was looking at a snake named Elvira, and she was quite a character. She belonged to a college student who, of course, came in leather jacket and piercings and studs, and she just loved this snake, and she had a perfect coat or scale pattern. So I did whatever I needed to do and gave her back to the owner and left the room. And I went out through the back door of the exam room to the back area. Next thing I know, I hear screaming from the lobby. I ran up there. There's the front half of Elvira, and all the society ladies in the waiting room are out the door. They didn't like this, snake doing this under the door. And what happened was, being a really smart snake, when she was making her getaway, she wasn't going to go with me to the back. She picked the front door, and her plan worked great until she hit the mouse she had for lunch the day before, and she was stuck. So, they don't teach you anything about freeing angry snakes in veterinary school. And in fact, I doubt I was the picture of veterinary professionalism sitting on the floor holding the snake. But I thought if I held her, maybe people would think I knew what I was doing. I really didn't. So my first thought was, okay, we'll take the door off its hinges, we'll get her out that way. The problem is it's a really heavy door, and I was worried we might squish her. So that wasn't going to work. So then I thought, I know, we'll lube her up, and we'll pull up on the door and see if I can just wedge her a little bit sideways. So to their credit, all the ladies came back in, and they grabbed the door, and my technician, Allie, looped her all up, and she went on the other side with the owner, and they pulled, and I got just enough clearance to wedge her sideways. And we got her out. So then I cleaned her up and gave her back to the owner, and in Minnesota, a lot of times people don't bring their snakes in cages because they want to keep them warm. So what they'll do is just zip them into their leather jacket, which I always worry about them driving, but that's what they do. So anyway, she zipped Elvira into her leather jacket, and about a minute later she said, "Elvira, no, don't do that." And she turned around, and Elvira had stuck her tail right down there. These ladies were horrified. They backed up and almost fainted. Anyway, so that was Elvira, and she ended up being fine, and she never got stuck again. I never gave her the opportunity to get stuck again, but she was quite a character. There's so many other wonderful animals to talk about, but I guess one of my favorites was a little pit bull named Cosmo. He was so sweet. He was just a youngster when he was coming into the clinic for, I think it was maybe his neutering procedure. And that day, Allie and I were in the clinic, and a salesperson stopped by. And he wanted to sell us office supplies. And, I was polite, and I said, "Okay, leave the information, and we'll look at it. The next time we need something, I'll consider it." Well, he wouldn't take no for an answer. And he refused to leave until we bought office supplies from him right then and there. And he even followed us in back. And I was scared. Allie was scared. I was going to call the police, and then I had a better idea. I asked Allie to go get Cosmo. And I'll just read a little portion for you. Inside the first run, Cosmo, a pit bull, snoozed on a blanket. His massive muscles bulged beneath his tawny brown coat. Allie opened the gate to his run. "Cosmo! Cosmo!" He sprang to his feet and bounded over the kennel threshold. Allie ran to the pharmacy with Cosmo tight on her heels. This youngster loved to play. He was the pit bull that was too friendly. He loped behind her with a silly grin on his face, with his tongue hanging out to the side. When they reached the pharmacy, Cosmo skidded to a halt in the middle of the room. The smile on his face vanished. He stared at the salesman without blinking. The hair on his back stood up. I walked over to his side and put my hand on him. "Go now, or I'll release the dog." As if on cue, Cosmo pulled back his lips to expose his massive teeth. A low growl rumbled from his throat. The man retreated behind the door, slammed it shut, and 2 seconds later we heard the doorbell ding. He was gone, and he never, ever returned. So I've found in my career that animals are amazing judges of character. And I'm just wondering if any of you have any idea how Cosmo knew that I was good, Allie was good, and this stranger was bad. Anyone have any ideas? Scent? Could be part of it.
Energy?
Yeah, definitely could be energy. Anything else?
I would think it would be your sense of uncomfortableness.
Yeah, but how did he read that I was uncomfortable? Any guesses? Do you know what he was specifically looking at? Body language, face. Well, you're getting really close. I'm sorry, what? That's true. He could probably feel me shaking. Actually, it's very interesting, but dogs exhibit what is called left gaze bias, and that's G-A-Z-E, left gaze bias. And what that means, it's something that people and primates do, but this created quite a stir when Dr. Gao in the United Kingdom discovered this. People express more emotion with the right side of their face. So when we meet each other, our eyes automatically shift left so I can read the right side of Abby's face. So that's just automatically how we do it. And for years it was thought that was just a primate human thing. Well, actually, dogs do it too. So I think Cosmo came into the room, looked us all over, and quick, his observations kind of coalesced into basically Dr. Nelson, Allie, good, stranger, bad. It probably didn't hurt that I always gave him lots of treats, but I'm okay. I'm open to bribery. That works for me. And so that, I think, is what tipped him off. But I just really want to encourage you to pay attention to your animals, because they are awesome judges of character. And if they're not acting right about a person that you're meeting or whatever, pay attention to that. There's something to it. So dogs are really kind of fun. They surprise me all the time. I'll never forget the day that I used to own a young golden retriever named Susie. Unfortunately, she passed away about 2 years ago at 15, but she was a wild child. I mean, this litter was bred to be agility and hunting dogs, and the girls were just crazy. They were all ADD dogs. Their feet didn't touch the ground. So I used to have to get up in the morning and run her for an hour just to get some of the energy off of her. Well, one day I was at the clinic and this little finch came in, little Lady Gullion finch. They weigh about 25 grams, the same as a quarter. And this finch had been egg bound. That's an emergency condition where the egg gets stuck in the hen's abdomen. I'll say abdomen, it's not really what it's called, but anyway, go with me. And she responded to treatment, passed the egg, and she had spent the rest of the afternoon napping in the incubator. So I went to check her one last time, and then her owners were going to come and pick her up. I opened a small portal in the side of the incubator, put my hand towards the sleeping finch. The last minute, her eye opened, and she was gone. I mean, gone. I saw a flash of color, and I couldn't find her anywhere. And you would be surprised how many places there are in a clinic for a 25-gram bird to hide. So for half an hour, we searched for this bird. It was 4:45. Her owner's going to be there at 5. And, picture yourself talking to these owners. Well, great news. Your bird passed the egg. She's great. Bad news. Lost her in the clinic. So I was panicking. And, when you're panicking, you don't think clearly. I thought, well, I know. I'll get Susie. She's a golden retriever. She can find the bird, right? She's a city slicker golden retriever. She's never hunted anything but her fruit bowl. She hasn't a clue. She grew up in a clinic with all kinds of hedgehogs and, all kinds of animals. The chances of her understanding what I was asking her to do to find a bird and actually being able to distinguish that scent from all the others, not great. But you're desperate, you go for it, right? Showed her the towel, said, Susie, find the bird, find the bird. She started to nose around, and then she went right to the ultrasound. Now, ultrasound is a solid metal box. How could the bird be in there? She kept nosing and whining and scratching, so I lifted out the back, and out flew the finch, right into Susie's mouth. Pried open her jaws, grabbed the bird. She was wet, but okay. I had her cleaned up with 5 minutes to spare. So, animals are just, I feel so privileged to be a veterinarian because I get to see the personalities of all these little creatures and experience them and also witness the bond that all of you share with your animals. And to me, that is just the reward for being a veterinarian. And before I tell you about my last favorite, not favorite, but my last interesting animal, I just want to say tonight I'm going to donate a portion of the proceeds, as you know, to Altered Tales. And I hope that we can all work together to really end pet overpopulation in the valley, especially in Maricopa County. It's a serious problem. And I'll never forget when I was an intern at Animal Medical Center, I was the night doc, which is not a good job. That means from midnight until 9 a.m., you are the only veterinarian in an 11-story building that had usually about 1,000 patients in it, one ward of just strictly chemo patients, 25 cages in isolation, in intensive care. One night I was there, I had 4 arrests at the same time. And I had a receptionist, 2 aides, 1 technician, and 1 ICU technician. And all but 1 made it. So it was quite the place. But anyway, their policy was that if animal control brought in a litter of kittens, the night doc had to euthanize them. And it just killed me. They were little ones, maybe 5 days old, and I had to put them to sleep. So I really hope that together we can get the word out that, you know, let's neuter and spay all the animals and give them all a better life. Because I really hope that if there's any potential veterinarians in the room, I hope you never have to go through that, because it is really sickening. And please stop by and introduce yourself to Ellen. She's the executive director of Altered Tales, and she brought some other staff members, which Chemo Brain again, can't remember all their names, but please go over and say hi and learn more about this wonderful organization. So I just want to leave you with one last story before we go into Q&A, and that's about this wonderful little cat named Radar. Now, I met Radar when he was 10 days old. He was a white ball of fur that fit in the palm of my hand. He had a pink nose and chubby cheeks, and he was adorable. Unfortunately, he had a medical problem. He was born with a condition called anophthalmia. He was blind. When I opened his eyelids, there were no eyeballs. The sockets were empty. So the breeder requested euthanasia. I couldn't do it. So when he was 13 weeks old, he came to live at the clinic. He and Genevieve, the 3-legged cat who is the star of this book, became kind of friends, more like brothers, sisters. Sometimes they loved each other, sometimes they hated each other. And Radar was amazing. He could memorize a room in about 20 minutes. He'd start in the middle, pad to a wall, pad back, repeat it with the other walls, and then do a perimeter check. He had it then. As long as you didn't move anything, it was great. Well, one day I was in a hurry for an emergency, dropped my bag in the middle of the room, and as Radar so loved to do, he went flying through the room, boom, right into my bag. Oh, poor guy. Thank goodness he was okay. When he shook it off, he went through that marking routine again, and the next time he ran through the pharmacy, he cleared the spot with ease. And even though I'd put my bag away, he continued to jump over that spot for 3 days. So, as you can imagine, he was a favorite with everyone. I mean, how could you resist this adorable little ball of fur? And it didn't matter if you didn't like cats. He would just sit by you and just stare at you. Well, not stare at you, but it used to bug people because he'd sit there and he'd be listening with his ears. And even if they weren't cat people, they had to pet him because he just made them feel like so uncomfortable if they didn't. And one day we had a group of 3rd graders come to the clinic for a field trip. And Radar was up on the counter in his normal position, greeting everyone who walked in. All the kids ran up to Radar. They had heard about this blind cat. They wanted to meet him. All the kids but one little boy. Adam stood against the wall, looking at the floor. Adam used to be one of the most outgoing kids in the class. He loved school, he had lots of friends, he loved the sports, but then he developed an eye condition. He had lazy eye, and as soon as the doctor put a patch over his right eye, he became depressed. He didn't want to play, he didn't want to go to school, and he certainly didn't want to pet Radar. Well, after 5 minutes of petting, Radar hopped off the counter, wove his way through all the legs, and sat right at Adam's feet. Adam turned around. And you can almost see Radar think, what the heck? Everyone pets me. I'm Radar. But it didn't take him long. He got right to work. He rubbed on Adam, he played with his shoelaces, he followed him all over the clinic, and when Adam left, he was coated with fur. Well, 3 hours later, Adam's mom, Linda, called me and said that since Adam had come home, he hadn't stopped talking about radar. Just radar this, radar that. It was the most he had said since the patch had gone on his eye. And then she said, could we come and visit Radar? Because, and her voice cracked, because Radar is the only one who understands how I feel. So I think all of us feel like like Adam at some point in our lives. Things are going great, and then something happens. The economic downturn hurts our business. Perhaps our kids start hanging out with the wrong crowd. Maybe our best friend posts something really nasty about us on Facebook. Or we get bad health news. I'm normally a pretty upbeat, happy person. I just feel so blessed to be a veterinarian, but when I got the big C diagnosis, I was depressed. I felt isolated and scared. But that's when we need to follow Adam's example and embrace the animals in our lives. Let them smother you with their unconditional and special love. And please pay attention to them if they start suddenly nosing one part of your body. It's a sign. As I talk to people, I've been doing a lot of talks about, cancer, and I hear at least 5 or 6 people after every talk tell me how their pet was trying to tell them about something and they didn't realize it until later. So pay attention to your pets. Let them love you, and improve the love in your life by embracing animals.